I've called this network concepts, but really if you just sort of have a broad skim of what we're looking at today, these are the kinds of things which we mostly try not to think about. Even though we use networks, these things are things that people like me, people like Mr. Widmer, Mrs. Ryan, people who oversee networks, they have to worry about and concern themselves with. And because they do that, if they do their job well, the rest of us don't really have to worry about it, because it sort of just happens, and we get access to this network, and it just works. Networks work. Okay, anyway, so the first thing we're going to think about is just these three terms, and we're going to try and define them. Okay, so let's start with network resources. When you hear the word resources, what normally comes to mind? Resources. Good. Raw materials such as coal, oil, natural gas. So we're talking about like fossil fuels, that kind of thing. What is it about those things that makes them a resource? A resource. Why do we call them resources? Good, right. So people want this stuff. You can do stuff when you've got resources, right? But, raw materials is not the only kinds of resources there are. What other kinds of resources are there? Sorry, did someone say? I didn't catch. Water, okay. All right, still raw materials. I'm thinking not so much physical things that I can like burn or boil and, do stuff with. Yeah, Jack? Thank you. Okay, so, for instance, any large company will have a whole department called HR, right? Which is about humans and us and our ability to do things, right? Being resources, which again, they're useful. You can do things with them, okay? All right, so, and they're sort of like the main categories. Therefore, on a network, what might the resources be? What are the things that are on a network which are useful and you can do things with? Say it again. Okay, let's start doing some broad brushstrokes, right? I'm going to say data, yes, but let's try and be a little more specific. You can get data in a system without it being a network, right? Like there's data everywhere in any kind of system. We talked about, let's see, systems, then systems that communicate, and communication systems, right? And even the most basic kind of system that has no ability to communicate, that's got data in it. That's useful, yes? So can we be a little more specific to a network? What kind of data might you get on a network that's, very useful? Yeah. Relevant information. Okay, we're going under the same kind of idea here. If it's relevant or meaningful, right? That makes it information. But what kind of information can you get on a network that you can't get otherwise? Yeah.
Files.
Okay. So what are we getting at here? We're getting at other people's data or information, right? And when we say other people's, we don't mean your prying eyes are getting into something you're not meant to. But for instance, if you want to share things with people, right, you need to be on a network to do that. And that's how you guys all do your presentation. And I can view your data, your presentation just up here because we reside on the same network. Okay? So data, okay. When you think about what makes up a system, you've got data and then you've got hardware. Here's one. Let me get a new color for us. We've got data, that's a big heading. We've got hardware, that's another big heading. And then we have, what's the third one? Software, thank you. Okay, now what I'd like you guys to do for a minute is to brainstorm for yourself. We've been talking about this kind of thing. If we had, say, a file server, then there will be kinds of data accessible on the network which are resources for you. Okay? I'd like you guys to get together in some groups for a minute and have a think, okay, what hardware might be connected to a network? This is one example, a hard drive, right? That would become a resource for everyone. What kinds of things do we tend to access through networks? And what about software? What kind of special software would be accessible through a network which becomes a resource that everyone can use? Okay, so I'll give you guys a couple of minutes, have a think about that, and then we'll come back together.